Did you know the tallest human being who ever lived was born in Illinois and that he was still growing when he died? Or that in the winter of 1811, the ground here shook so violently that church bells rang and for a few hours, the Mississippi River appeared to run backward? There's a lot more to Illinois than corn, Chicago, and a flat highway. Today we're counting down 20 wild facts about this state, and the closer we get to number 1, the harder they are to believe. Let's get into it. Fact 20. The Chicago River that runs the wrong way on purpose. Everyone knows Chicago, but almost nobody knows what the city did to its own river. The Chicago River used to flow naturally into Lake Michigan, which became a serious problem because the city was dumping its sewage into the exact same water it drank from. In 1900, engineers pulled off something staggering. They reversed the river's flow permanently, forcing it to run backward, away from the lake, and toward the Mississippi River system instead. Chicago solved a deadly public health crisis by making an entire river change direction. It still runs the wrong way today, more than a century later. Fact 19. The tallest man in recorded history. In the town of Alton, Illinois, a boy named Robert Wadlow was born in 1918, and his body simply never stopped growing. His pituitary gland pumped out an unusually high amount of growth hormone, and by adulthood he stood 8 feet 11 inches tall, the tallest human being ever reliably measured on Earth. He was still growing on the day he died, at just 22 years old. People in Alton called him the Gentle Giant. The tallest person in all of recorded human history grew up on the streets of one small Illinois river town. Fact 18. The canyon wonderland Illinois isn't supposed to have. The flat state reputation falls apart the moment you drive south. Down near the bottom of Illinois rise the Shawnee Hills, a rugged band of forest, cliffs, and bizarre rock formations the glaciers never touched. At a place called the Garden of the Gods, wind and water have carved the sandstone into towering, otherworldly shapes that look like they belong in Utah, not the Midwest. People assume you have to leave the region entirely to find scenery like this. It has been sitting quietly in southern Illinois the whole time. Fact 17. The cave that belonged to river pirates. On the southern tip of the state, along the Ohio River, a 55-foot wide cave sits chewed straight into a limestone bluff. Cave-in rock was worn open by ancient floods and glacial meltwater, and in the early 1800s it became a genuine outlaw den. River pirates used the cave as a hideout, ambushing flatboats full of settlers as they drifted downriver, robbing them and worse. A natural cave on the Illinois shoreline was once one of the most dangerous stretches of river in all of early America. Fact 16. The state that used to sit on the equator. Illinois has not always been in the Midwest. Hundreds of millions of years ago, this land sat down near the equator, covered by a warm, shallow tropical sea. Trilobites crawled across the seafloor while squid-like creatures in cone-shaped shells drifted overhead, and their remains piled up into the limestone that now sits beneath the cornfields. The flat farmland of central Illinois is the dried-out floor of a vanished ocean. Every grain silo in the state stands on what used to be a tropical seabed. Fact 15. The flattest state that's hiding a high point. Everyone pictures Illinois as pancake flat, and most of it is. The far northwest corner is a different world. Tucked near the Wisconsin border sits Charles Mound, the highest natural point in the state at 1,235 feet. A rolling farmland hill you can only visit on a handful of days each year when the private owners allow it. What makes it strange is why it's there at all. That corner sits in the driftless area, a region the glaciers somehow missed completely, leaving rugged hills in a state they otherwise flattened smooth. The highest ground in Illinois is a place the Ice Age forgot. Fact 14. The 211 billion tons of buried fuel. Beneath roughly 2/3 of Illinois lies something most residents never think about. About 68% of the state sits on top of coal, an estimated 211 billion tons of it, left behind by ancient swamp forests that grew here long before the first dinosaur. French explorers were already documenting coal seams near Ottawa around 350 years ago, some of the earliest coal use in North America. The catch is its high sulfur content, which makes burning it cleanly a challenge. The ground under Illinois is packed with buried energy from a forest that died 300 million years ago. Fact 13. The glass hidden in ancient sand. North of the Illinois River, the bedrock is made of extremely pure ancient sandstone, laid down along the beaches of that vanished tropical sea. This sand runs so clean and fine that it's prized for manufacturing glass and for casting metal. What looks like plain rock is really the fossilized shoreline of a beach that existed 400 million years before any human walked on it. Illinois is quietly sitting on the raw material for glass, shaped by waves that stopped rolling before life had even left the ocean. Fact 12. The glaciers that farmed Illinois first. Most of the state looks the way it does because of ice. During the last ice age, enormous glaciers ground down from the north, bulldozing the land flat and crushing rock into the deep, rich soil that makes Illinois farmland some of the most productive on the planet. Where the ice finally stopped, it dumped long ridges of debris called moraines that still shape the terrain today. The reason Illinois grows so much corn is that a sheet of ice more than a mile thick spent thousands of years preparing the ground. The glaciers were the state's first farmers. Fact 11. The prairie that vanished from the Prairie State. Illinois calls itself the Prairie State, which has become almost a cruel joke. Before settlers arrived, tall grass prairie blanketed the majority of Illinois. Grass tall enough to hide a person on horseback, rolling to the horizon in every direction. Today, only a tiny fraction of 1% of that original prairie survives. Nearly all of it plowed under for farmland within a few generations. The very thing Illinois named itself after was almost completely erased from the state that carries the name. Fact 10. The state the great rivers drew. Illinois barely needed a surveyor because moving water outlined most of it. The Mississippi runs down the entire western edge. The Ohio traces the south, and the Wabash marks part of the east, which means Illinois is very nearly an island, wrapped on three sides by rivers. Few states in the country are so completely defined by their water. Illinois is a piece of land that the great rivers of America drew the border around. Fact 9. The small towns that made a president. Illinois calls itself the land of Lincoln, and that history runs deeper than the license plates suggest. Before the presidency, Abraham Lincoln served in the Illinois legislature and practiced law in Springfield, and it was on Illinois soil during his 1858 debates with Stephen Douglas that he sharpened the argument against slavery in front of crowds that drew national attention. Those debates played out in ordinary towns like Ottawa, Freeport, and Alton. The man who would hold the entire country together first found his voice in small-town Illinois. Fact 8. The capital the river swallowed. Springfield was not always the capital. When Illinois became the 21st state in 1818, its first capital was a Mississippi River town called Kaskaskia. Government later moved to Vandalia, and only afterwards settled in Springfield, which is where the story turns eerie. Over the following decades, the Mississippi shifted its course so violently that it cut the old capital off from the rest of the state and swallowed much of the original town whole. Illinois' very first capital city was partly erased from the map by the same river it was built beside. Fact 7. The earthquake zone in the middle of the country. Nobody expects earthquakes in the Midwest, yet southern Illinois sits at the edge of one of the most dangerous seismic zones in the eastern United States. The New Madrid seismic zone runs up through the region and produces small tremors constantly, most far too faint to feel. Scientists estimate a real chance of a major quake in the coming decades. And because the solid bedrock of the central United States carries shaking so efficiently, the damage would spread across a much wider area than a similar quake out west. Illinois sits beside a sleeping giant that most of its residents have no idea exists. Fact 6. The winter, the ground wouldn't stop moving. That danger is not theoretical, because it has already happened at a scale that's hard to believe. Starting in December 1811 and stretching into 1812, the New Madrid zone unleashed a series of earthquakes estimated around magnitude 8, some of the largest in American history. The shaking reached across roughly 27 future states, rang church bells more than 1,000 miles away in Boston, and toppled chimneys in Cincinnati. In southern Illinois, the church bell in Old Cahokia rang by itself as the ground heaved. For months afterward, the earth barely stopped trembling. Fact 5. The night the Mississippi ran backward. Here's the part of that earthquake that sounds like pure myth, except it was witnessed and written down. During the most violent shocks, the ground along the Mississippi lurched upward hard enough to create temporary waterfalls. And for a few hours, the mighty river appeared to run backward, upstream, against its own current. The islands vanished. Brand new lakes were carved into existence. Eyewitnesses described the water standing still and then rushing the wrong way. One of the largest rivers on the continent was forced into reverse by the sheer force of the earth moving underneath it. Fact 4. The people who were here first and vanished. Long before Chicago, before Springfield, before any European arrived, Illinois was home to an advanced civilization archaeologists call the Mississippians. They were master builders and skilled astronomers, organized enough to move millions of baskets of earth by hand, with no wheels and no draft animals to help them. They raised a sprawling city, laid out on a deliberate plan aligned to the sun, complete with plazas, neighborhoods, and a giant calendar built from cedar posts. They left no written language, so we don't even know what they called themselves. An entire sophisticated society rose in Illinois and then disappeared, leaving only mounds of earth behind. Fact 3. The lost city bigger than London. This is the one that stops people cold. That Mississippian city, now called Cahokia, sat just across the river from modern St. Louis, and at its peak around the year 1250 it was larger than London was at the very same moment in history, home to tens of thousands of people. At its center stood Monk's Mound, a flat-topped earthen pyramid rising about 100 feet and covering roughly 14 acres at its base, making it the largest earthwork in all of the Americas. Every basket of that dirt was hauled up by hand. The biggest city in what is now the United States sat in Illinois for centuries, and almost nobody learns it in school. Fact 2. The mystery nobody has solved. What happened to Cahokia is where it turns genuinely haunting. Within about 150 years of reaching its peak, this thriving metropolis was slowly abandoned until it stood completely empty, and no one is certain why. Researchers point to a mix of possible causes, including deforestation, flooding, disease, and the breakdown of the city's central authority, but there is no single confirmed answer. Tens of thousands of people built one of the great cities of the medieval world and then walked away from it. A civilization that rivaled the cities of Europe simply dissolved, and the reason is still argued over today. Fact 1. The pyramid hiding in plain sight. Here's the fact that should break your brain. There is a genuine ancient pyramid in Illinois, larger at its base than some of the famous pyramids of the old world. And yet, millions of Americans have no idea it exists. Monk's Mound has stood for around 1,000 years, surviving farming, erosion, and even the construction of an interstate highway across the ancient city around it. And it still rises over the Illinois landscape today. You can climb its steps and stand where a ruler's temple once looked out over a city bigger than London. The largest earthen monument in the entire Western Hemisphere is not in Mexico or Peru. It sits in Illinois, and it has been hiding in plain sight the whole time. So the next time somebody tells you Illinois is just corn, Chicago, and flat highway, you'll know the truth. This is a state built on a vanished ocean, packed with buried coal, scarred by an earthquake that reversed a river, and crowned by a 1,000-year-old pyramid left behind by a lost civilization bigger than London. All of it hiding in plain sight. And now, you're one of the few people who actually knows it's there. If any of these broke your brain, stick around, because every state in this country is hiding something, and we're just getting started.